Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're attending from. We are worldwide today for our webinar, A Lean Safety Story, All Together in a New Culture of Caring, presented by Jacobs. We have Todd Hart, Brent Wise, and Anne-Marie Thornquist with us today. They are the winners of the Safety and Construction Week member campaign. So this is going to be a treat for you guys. I'm Eileen Goldberg with LCI. I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar, and there's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants, but it will also be on YouTube as well as on the LCI website. We will have a Safety and Construction Week member campaign webpage. You will be able to see all of the submissions and all of what everybody had to say about their safety journey. So be on the lookout for that. You'll also see the control panel, right-hand side of your screen. There's a red arrow to the left of that panel. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that for to get rid of your control panel throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. At the bottom of your control panel, you'll see the questions box. If you have any questions, please put them in the box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. If they reference a particular portion or a particular slide, please let us know so we can answer your question accordingly. Now, we're also going to be doing, let's try that again, a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we can improve to add more value to the presentation. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we absolutely want that feedback from you so we can make our webinars what it is exactly that you'd like to hear. Just a quick recap, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants, as well as being available on social media, on our website, so be on the lookout for that. You have the minimization and maximization area on the control panel, as well as the questions box. Put any questions you have in that box, they'll be answered at the end of the webinar, and be thinking about those plus, deltas, and feedback as we go through as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Anne-Marie. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Eileen, and thank you to all who are attending to give us this opportunity to talk about our story. My name's Anne-Marie Thornquist. I am the Director of Lean Implementation for Jacobs in our Life Sciences North America group. And I've had the pleasure of working with these two gentlemen over the past few years, and they have really picked up the ball and ran with it as far as lean implementation on a major project. So I'd like to give them each a minute to introduce themselves and tell about their role on the project.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Brent Wise, I was a superintendent over one of the buildings here on site. My role was for the Lean Champion was to be the day-to-day in the field, boots on the ground, active person who was implementing the Lean structure within the project.
I'm Todd Hart, the Design Constructability Manager. I did more of the in-office meetings with the client, trade partners, and helped out Brent out in the field when visualizing things going on.
Thanks. So what we're going to do today is first we're going to tell you about this project that we have, this major project, talk about our lean and our safety focus, what actions we took. And of course, we're going to talk about the challenges because I don't know about you, but listening to stories where people say, we did this, it was wonderful, everything worked, is not as realistic or as helpful as listening to, hey, we have these challenges and this is what we did to overcome them. So our team will talk about that. We'll talk about best practices that came out of this and lessons learned, and finally, give you our safety results, and then talk to you a little bit about the whole Jacobs Beyond Zero safety program and how this lean implementation fits in with that. But of course, this is a safety week, so we will start with a safety minute. Go ahead.
Right, yeah, every Jacobs meeting, we always start with a safety minute. So I chose this week here in the US particular, we're moving into our warm season. It's hot. Our workers are out in the sun or in not necessarily air-conditioned spaces all the time. And we need to make sure that everyone's hydrated. The moment that the dehydration symptoms start occurring, you are already behind the 8 ball. So again, some tips up here on there, keep cool water nearby when you're thirsty. Watch out for your people. That's going to be a central theme for today. is just the culture of caring. You know, if you see something, say something, especially if someone's not feeling or looking right. And again, right, some formulas here that you can take to your site for what you should be recommending to your teams as they work through their days.
Thanks so much. So let's talk about what you want to accomplish today. Brent, go ahead.
All right, so for today's goals, there's a lot of things that we would like to cover. However, you know, we narrowed them down. The overall arching goal is we need to protect our precious resources. And our precious resources ultimately are the people that we work with, you know, whether it's ownership or it's the construction management teams, all the way down to every individual on site. That is our most precious resource. And I think this project took a step outside of what is considered normal to understand how we could really affect not only change for our project, but taking everything a step forward. You know, so how do we utilize those lean tools? How do we think outside the design box? You know, prefabrication. Where can this work be done in a controlled environment? You know, and the last takeaway is, you know, no one can put a price on anyone's life. So we shouldn't be trying that. So again, best practices for how we can implement and keep our precious resources safe. So our project, it is 7 buildings going up simultaneously. It is a greenfield site. We are doing an effort to bring our client to the market in an aggressive manner, as most owners need. And again, when the project was first brought to us, we wanted to identify things throughout the entire life cycle of the project that we could make and improve on from a lean standpoint. You know, we needed to optimize our workflow because, again, we're dealing with precious resources. We're dealing with limited resources. And there was a lot of work to do in a very short period of time. So going on to that, on that note, early in design, you know, we knew that this was going to be a problem, right? 7 buildings, yep. A lot of money, a lot of resources being needed. So the first thing that I think the project looked at is where can we save time, and where can we identify the high risk work in saving that time, right? And I think we found that in a lot of things like modularization, offsite work. You know, the team utilized a lot of offsite racks, a lot of offsite work that got brought in, shipped in, pre-manufactured so that we could go right into it. Todd, I know you had a lot of things to deal with that, especially on the field side, with how those racks were assembled and how they got brought to site. So,
right. Yeah, well, by modularizing the racks, you knock out a lot of the rigging needed that you would have in a stick build, which would save tremendous time and save tremendous elevated work. Also, you know, we always think about, you know, planning. You always think you're sitting in an office planning everything out. What we did, we brought our planning out to the areas. Each area, we had a whiteboard in, and we would bring our planning tool out there, and we would actually go through planning with the trade members, the clients, the CMs, everybody was a part of it. You know, this helped out with anybody having any better ideas, you know, to make things work safer or you know, more efficient. It was a really good tool to use. It keeps everybody involved, and it lets everybody know that you care and you're out there trying to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, our ultimate goal of this was to reduce the high risk labor hours involved with this. And again, those racks saved us, you know, not only schedule time, but it allowed for work to be done in a much safer manner that we'll talk about here later on.
Yeah, we use the last planning system out here, which helps with our workflow, respect for people, which is the biggest thing I think we could have done out here. Is if you have respect through all the trades and the clients and the CMs and everybody's working together, things are going to go much smoother. Try to reduce waste, put up some visual management for everyone, so we can all keep all the team members involved, all the way down, to the trade partners working in the field.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of respect for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the development of the team was very critical for us because, we had a lot of people on the team that were not used to what is the last planner system, not really used to or involved with lean construction. And, it took a lot of effort to make sure that we got those teams on board. You look at the picture here, this picture here was a snapshot in time, but it was an everyday occurrence of the team talking through, discussing, working through priorities, working through the planning systems that had been implemented, and really trying to optimize what's best for the group. There was nothing short of collaboration on this project. In talking about that collaboration, Gemba walks. The Gemba walks throughout the site, I thought, were something I've never seen before. Everything from ownership level walking every week to project management level walking every week, all the way down to the tradecraft themselves walking safety every week, and walking different buildings, walking different structures, and getting that real-time feedback throughout the project, I think was instrumental in its success.
Exactly.
Furthermore on that, implementing lean concepts, respect for people. People are the heartbeat of what we do in this industry. And again, I go back to that central theme of these are our precious resources. Not everyone is always comfortable on a project, whether, maybe they're new to construction, maybe it's just some barrier that's with them on that site. How do we bring these people into the fold of lean construction in the last planner system when they have no exposure to it outside of this project? All of this kind of encompassed into a way that the whole project evolved into a working method of collaboration and optimizing the whole. I'm going to talk the Gemba walks. I can't stress this enough how important it was for me to see on a weekly basis leadership on the site giving real-time feedback, giving us great feedback and options of what they would like to see, or things that were going really well. It's both of them. And again, the visual management. Todd talked about this earlier. Having the plan in the field for everyone to see every single day was a game changer in terms of making sure that everyone knew where they were supposed to be, so we eliminated hazards in overcrowding of spaces.
Yeah, as you see in the picture right there, we had this board set up on every floor when you entered the building. This gave you, all of your paperwork you needed for your safety paperwork. Any kind of issues, we put other things on board, which was involved in the area that may be a safety issue. So that's a really great thing to have. So people can visualize this, walk up to it, see what's going on in the area, and understand.
So you knew walking into our building, right, that was the first thing you saw on every floor.
Yep.
And that was the first thing you see, right? So safety is always on the front of the mind, always the first thing you see going into the project. Every meeting started that way. Again, it's no matter what we did on the project, safety was the heart of everything.
You have on here about optimizing the whole, conducting deep dives into means and methods. How is this different on this project than other projects?
Yeah, so thinking about that a little bit, it's really, we took some of the questions farther. When you're dealing with top-down construction and you're working through how to implement complex systems, we had to ask ourselves not only, okay, what's next in understanding the order, but the next question always came of, how are you doing that work? How are you doing that next work? Because oftentimes we would have to circle back around and reevaluate our planning methods because someone was blocked out from a critical piece of how they plan to install that. The collaboration effort amongst the team with the knowledge that we had into different implementation methods. Hey, I saw this done on this site before. This would work. Maybe we should try it. And again, listening to those ideas of everyone's experience was, I think, very critical for us to make the job site safer throughout the entire process.
Yeah, just as Brent was saying, it all boils down to trust. Trust in trade partners, trust in the client, trust in the CMs. You always have someone that's going to come in and say, oh, I'm going to do it this way, and this is the only way to do it. Well, you have to sit those people down, let them into the group and see how it actually works. You listen to their way they want to do it, and then we kind of make suggestions on how it could be better done. And basically 100% of the time, they were good with that. They really got into the group, got into the flow. We also, managed our workflows by having several meetings a week. We did, planning meetings. We did look ahead meetings. We did, commitment meetings. We met a lot. I think that was the key to it. And any little problem we came across, we would stop and go over and resolve.
Yeah, they were quickly resolved.
Yeah, it just increased the reliability in the project and how we did things and how things moved along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were numerous accounts that we probably had to go back and resequence something. I know there was one particular suite we were working through that had a lot of different ways we could go. And actually, I think we replanned this area multiple times before we actually finally settled on a sequence. But we were going through those reiterations, and each time we went through it, there was a different little nugget that someone threw in there, said, oh, maybe we didn't think about it that way. Or, you go through it, you plan it, and then, oh, we didn't think about it that way. And so again, it's constant readjustment of, what we think today, understanding what we don't know, and just evolving as we go, right? Let it roll, and try to make sure that we are constantly thinking about not only safety, but how are we optimizing everyone? How are we keeping these areas safe? How are we making sure that everyone has their workflows where they need them to be? So lean actions to increase safety. I can't stress enough, modularization. So this is something that needs to be identified either very early on in the design, or it needs to be identified very early on after contracts are awarded, because this is where I think a lot of time can be not only saved for the project, but if our overarching goal is to protect our resources, how do we eliminate these things, right? And we talked about the racks. Over 700,000 labor hours of elevated work was eliminated on the project. That's over 20 miles of piping that we took out of people's hands, where they don't have an issue with dropping something. They don't have an issue with having to work not below other work going on. There was a lot of efficiencies gained from that standpoint. But again, this had an overarching, how do we just make this safer? We had reliable planning. We knew when that rack was going to be here. We knew what sequence it needed to be installed. And then we could better downstream plan of that for any piping that needed to come off those racks in the field side. The offsite work led to much better predictable outcomes. We knew schedule-wise when they were coming. We could plan for them. We made things better in an environment that someone was only focused on that pipe rack or that modularized piece of equipment, rather than focusing on the 10 other things that were going on in the background, all around the site. They weren't around 1,000 lifts every day. They could focus on their work. They could focus on their wells.
Yeah, just as Brent was alluding to, when you're designing the project, don't only design the project for install. you have to think of safety. I mean, you have to think of safety, how it's going to improve your entire project, how it's going to make it flow faster. A couple things we did in our meetings here, on our planning meetings, we would do intensive spatial planning. We would take an area, we had our suite maps, we call it. We took architectural of the entire building and we cut them out in areas we call suites. So we would take a suite and say, we're going to discuss this week. Everybody would sit down, load their entire scope into that. And when we got to the meeting, we would all figure out how to put that together, how to make it work efficiently and safely. And that was a huge part of this project.
I mean,
that's where you build your trust.
Absolutely. I mean, not only that, but I mean, we would cancel some meetings because people weren't prepared. I mean, that's how critical some of being prepared to those meetings were. I mean, if we didn't get that work done, we needed to push it off a day because the planning needed to be there because we were wasting too much time with people not prepared. You know, again, talking through that, we talked about a lot about the sequencing. You know, we had a lot of complex systems stacked on top of each other in these tight areas of the suites, as Todd was talking about. And, you know, to dig into that, again, it's not just going A, B, C, D, top-down construction. It really is thinking and asking the questions of how are you going to put that in, you know, because certain things had to go in before that weren't necessarily ideal, but we needed to talk about safety before we could figure out what absolutely had to go in before other things, right? There was a lot of discussions around sequence.
Absolutely. I mean, with the number of people on site, you know, we had around 3,200 people on site building this site. So, you know, and able to keep everybody safe, we had to do a lot of planning, a lot of spatial planning, a lot of manpower planning in these suite areas to keep people from being on top of each other. And, you know, I'm not going to say it was a fun thing, but it was a very effective thing.
It's a needed thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the GroupMe app, we talked about that. So I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, real-time communication, the importance of it. And we utilized the GroupMe app, which is available for anyone to give real-time information on the project. If there were testing that was going on, if there was a safety issue that was needing to be addressed, if there was you know, just walks going on, or you know, you name it, it probably was put on this app at some point for communication. And again, you know, a lot of projects fall because communication just goes away. And I think that's one thing that throughout this project, even as we wrap up, communication is still very vital to everything that's going on to the success that we've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this GroupMe app, it was used by the clients, the safety team, the trade partners, everyone on site. We split it up by buildings, and we actually had an actual site GroupMe app. And as Brent was saying, we went through everything from lightning stand downs to, hey, your material's laying on the floor over here. It could cause a safety problem for someone. Please come pick it up.
Yeah.
And the trade partners would answer right back. You know, it's just like a live chat, you know, would answer right back, be right there, clean it up. Yeah, you could get this on the App Store. It could be detrimental to your project.
And it was visual to everyone, right? There's accountability across the board for every group. So I think that was key to keeping everyone accountable, not only ourselves as a CM team, but each one out in the field. All right. So I think one of the key takeaways, certainly a big thing that I've ever seen on a project, we had a full-time medic office on site. We had nurses and a physician's assistant on site at all times that work was taking place. You know, and it wasn't just necessarily that, you know, an issue happened and we needed to have someone get checked out. It was, if you're having a personal issue, right? Yeah. You're not feeling well. You're not something just isn't right. Anyone on site was allowed to go in, get checked out. You know, all the way from personal medical issues that we had, or you name it, it probably got taken care of by this medic staff. We need to consider this when we move into these projects, because not everyone in the construction industry is always the healthiest of people.
Correct.
And we need to keep our people in mind at all times. Maybe your site can't necessarily support a full-time medical staff, but maybe we need to ask ourselves, how are we integrating with local medical teams so that there's better responses, quicker responses on our job sites, whether they're close to something or remote, right? Having those plans in place, having everything ready to go is vital to these issues. We did have one particular issue on site. We had one gentleman who had a full-time personal medical issue, and they went to the hospital. And when they went to the hospital, the comment that they received was that they were in better shape getting there than what they have seen from other urgent care centers. So the health care that these individuals on site received was beyond what you would expect on most sites, and they've been vital to this program.
Yeah, I mean, on top of just being here for emergencies, they actually have done training classes for CPR, first aid, other training classes. They've actually, helped lots of people just with, like Brent was saying, somebody might have had the flu or something, or somebody didn't feel good. They went in there, took care of them, and if they needed to, they'd send them on to the hospital. But yeah, they were very detrimental to the site as well. If there's an issue,
They were there.
they were there. I mean, they're there on call 24/7.
Yeah, we had one other thing that this group was able to do throughout the project. They had over 10,000 people go through their hands-only CPR and stop the bleed training. And again, going back to one of the central themes, they're taking that training, what they've learned here, and now taking it back to the industry, to their next project.
Yep.
Passing it forward.
And that cuts down on response time. If you have that many people out on your job site that understand CPR, stop the bleed, first aid, when something happens, they can respond immediately. And then the team here responds within, I say, 5 minutes.
Yeah,
they were great. You have a better chance of helping people, saving lives.
But like any good project, we certainly had our challenges, right? I go back to an earlier comment, multiple buildings. Each of them were kind of ran their own separate ways in a lot of ways. There was a lack of uniformity in how the last planner system was utilized, different interpretations between the teams. Some people more bought in than others. Certainly the project that the building that Todd and I were helping be a part of, I think a lot of this was absorbed by all of us, and this is just the way we're going to do it, right? We're working through that. And that wasn't always the case on the project. So, how do we get people to buy in early, even on one single project? Frequent changes. We had a ton of them. I mean, I think we're still probably running through some changes. But again, it was the constant reiterating, rehashing, going back over, this is going to work, this isn't going to work, kind of those quick pivots that we needed to do to keep the workflow moving. I think those were very critical for us to evaluate those plans. I mean, whether we were talking about, certain mechanical systems and, oh, great, now the client needs this, how do we replan it? How do we do all this work safely? I'm thinking of one in particular, but, there was just a lot of stuff that we always had to be vigilant about in terms of our planning.
Okay, some of the takeaways we can get from this, the way we made our job work more efficiently. We modularized systems, which cut down on falls, cut down on time. We had pre-built skids. if you can have that on your site, that would be wonderful. And I would very much suggest getting them past the beta before they get out there. Uh, we optimize the space, with our spatial planning.
Yeah.
Make sure all our trade partners can continue work with no stopping, waiting on others. And our meetings, we had daily morning meetings every day at 6:30 in the morning in the field, which was that picture you saw a little bit earlier with everybody sitting around the whiteboards. We discussed everything from what's happening that day to what's happening in the future, any conflicts, any constraints, even any issues. If someone in the room had a personal issue, we would even discuss that. I mean, that's what you do. And it makes this project move so much more smoothly if you can trust who you're working with.
Well, and I mean, talking about the daily meetings, right? I think, there was the core group that was always in there. And I was thinking about a meeting that we had just a few weeks ago where everyone was in there. We were discussing the topics of the day, and something got brought up and everyone just burst out in laughter, right? The camaraderie that was built amongst that team was, I think, probably the best I've ever seen on a project. But those daily discussions were very vital to us, right? It was for us as management, I think it kept our finger like on the pulse of not only what the trade partners were feeling, in terms of pressure or workload or whatever the case may be, but we really knew whether things were done safe, whether things were headed in the right direction, right? And I felt that meeting was very important for us to be able to course correct. Again, not only just from a planning standpoint, but if something was going on that maybe people didn't think we had a good handle on, that was very apparent coming out of that meeting. Again, it goes back to the trust you talked about.
Brought to the surface right there. Constraint put up on the board. You would say who's liable for it.
Absolutely.
And
accountable.
When is the piece going to be here? When is the part going to be here? What's the date?
Yeah, I mean, the accountability part was massive.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it was all roses all the time. It wasn't, but you have to do that to get projects along. Okay, some of the, optimizing our schedule, lean thinking for our project, using the tools we have, with all our visualization, teamwork, and, to discuss the meetings again. Everybody says, oh, great, I have to go to another meeting. A little bit of time spent in a meeting will save you weeks or months out in the field. The trade partners at first, they wasn't too enthusiastic about having certain meetings we were having. They were saying they're just another meeting of what we just had for something else.
Sure.
But once they got into it and started working together, talking with each other, everything went smoothly.
Sure.
You have to be flexible on this. You have to listen to everyone's opinion, and sometimes it can get heated. But at the end of the day, we all walk out of there with a good schedule, a good look forward, how to install and be safe.
I mean, that I was thinking about that just last night. One of the things that I thought was really cool to see on the project was, utilizing our plan and implementing that plan, getting a printout of the plan that everyone did together, and then taking that plan and putting it out in the field and kind of tracking it, on the day-to-day, week-to-week basis as to how things were going. It was a group effort all the way through, because not only were they seeing what the planning was in the office, but they got to see it in the field in real time as to how effective their planning was. What could they still continue to improve, so that when we went to the next area, the next 6-week look ahead, what could we still look to plan better? Where were our gaps? Where were our holes? And again, that thinking, that lean thinking of continuous improvement, how do we create better planning? I think that was the visual, right? Mm-hmm. We worked on this plan together as a team. We took it out, we hung it up in the field, we tracked it daily. We knew what did and didn't work in real time. And, again, you go back to that flexibility, right? Not every plan was successful. We had to replan things. It's just the nature of what we had to do. but the flexibility that everyone showed, the grace when mistakes were made that was shown is certainly a culture of caring that, we wanted to create.
Yeah, that, I want to hit on what Brent just said about, everybody feeling like they're going to get in trouble if something goes wrong. It's not that way here. It's totally different. We work together so good that if you have an issue, if something goes wrong, something breaks, something happens, we discuss it right then. We get everybody and we discuss it. It's not to, get down on the person who did it or, cause problems. It's to move forward. So we would sit there and we would plan, okay, it happened. How are we going to move forward?
Yeah.
And that was a great way to handle it.
It is all about how you talk to people.
Yep. Few of the other things, planning our work, like we were saying, we had multiple planning sessions, but also just like I was just stating, if something happens in the field or there's a way that's you want to do something that you feel is unsafe, it wasn't just a safety man that went over there to help. The CMs, we would go over there, we would get with the trade partners, even the clients sometime would come out there, and we would all discuss how we're going to do it better and move forward. We had some intense planning meetings. Okay, me and Brett said, okay, you're going to be good cop, bad cop today, kind of a thing, but it all works out great. But, the way we did our spatial planning, like I was saying, we have our sector suites, and we'll go in that suite and we'll look at every single thing we have to do. So if you look at the picture here on your slide, that's just a top view of one little area, and you can see how congested that is. Imagine putting 30 people in that room to work.
Yeah. So, and I think that's where how we planned, it comes back to that third question that I keep talking about. It's not just building it, okay, some sequentially top down. It is genuinely digging into the weeds in those conversations, those planning sessions of what you're going to use, how you're going to use them. Does that really work with everything that's going on? And again, I'm going back to instances where we were trying to, install a certain piece of equipment or a wall or some sort, and how, we had to stop because what was being proposed by them, what means and methods that they knew wouldn't work for the system in the program that we were running. So, again, it's partnering back up with safety. Hey, this isn't going to work because of this. How do we work around this? What tools are available to us, to fit into that area? That interdependency, that sequencing was vital to us, not only from the standpoint of, top down, everything go in, but the interdependency of what tools that you're going to, I'm going to reiterate that. The tool that people are using to install is just as important as what you're installing, because that can play a big role in the impact of safety in the area.
Yeah, we definitely, with the amount of people we had in these small areas, the piping, the steel, HVAC, everything going up, it was crucial for us to plan it to where we had nobody working above anyone else at any certain time.
Yeah.
That, yes, we have to get the room built. Yes, it's on the schedule, but we're not going to put anybody's life in jeopardy to do this.
Absolutely.
And to touch on what Brent said a little bit earlier about the teams being prepared in the planning meetings, what we would do, we would set out, our little sector suites in one of our planning meetings, and we'll say, okay, I want you guys to go and install all your scope in here and be ready for when we have our next planning meeting.
So we can sync
with
it. And we can talk through it as a team.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We had a lot of teams that would put 4 stickies in there, and then we had a lot of teams that would put 84 stickies in there.
Right. Managing that.
Yep. So it worked though. We worked through it.
Yep. The last of our, kind of the lessons learned here is, fostering that environment. We talk a lot about that collaboration. We talk a lot about that open-mindedness. it's not necessarily easily defined as how you foster that environment. It really is kind of a feel thing. I mean, these projects know whether or not they're in a good shape or bad shape with the feedback. And if you're not getting that feedback, maybe you need to start there, right? You need to be engaged with the teams to make sure that they know that feedback is welcomed, and it's received, and there's actionable items that come out of that loop. How do we take these lean tools and minimize exposures, right? Again, going back to optimizing the whole. How do we respect people? How do we eliminate people's risky conditions? Lean can do that for us, right? If we take those practices of, trying to drive the system, to efficiency, we can do that for safety as well. And again, right, early work is very important. Getting with the design teams, making sure that they're on board. Even if you have a drawing set, okay, how can we do this safer? What can we talk through with the engineer that maybe fits their design intent or their design purpose or whatever the case is? But taking that and then going through and say, okay, this is what I can give you, and I can reduce or eliminate this. I think those are important questions. Again, reducing high risk work should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. We should strive for a project with the least amount of high risk hours, out there.
Absolutely.
And again, that comes back to the means and methods, having those discussions, respecting them for their craft, but asking questions and challenging people on what they know.
Exactly. Yeah, not only, try to eliminate physical safety in the field, mental safety through your workers is just as important. You have a lot of people out here on these projects that are, have a lot on their shoulders, a lot of deadlines to meet. And, if you see someone that's kind of, I want to say angry or in a situation like that, just stop and talk to the person, say, are you okay?
Yeah.
I've done this multiple times, and you would not imagine the change in that person once you stop and talk to them. They'll have, they could have some severe personal issues going on.
Yep.
That kind of affects the way they're, acting. So sit down, talk to them. I guarantee you things will change.
Absolutely. All right, so we've talked through kind of the overall project. We've talked through some methods in which we tried to achieve our goals, and here is what our goals this is the wrap up of what we've done. So we had at peak on the site, we had over 3,000 people here at the same time. We've had over 10,000 people come through the gates. Again, going back to the hands-on only CPR and the Stop the Bleed program, we've had over 12,250,000 craft hours on site and still counting. Total recordable incident rate of 0.06. We've had total recordables on the project 4. And I'm going to come back to this note, eliminated 700,000 labor hours of elevated work or work at height. And I think this is right here is a massive thing, because this was something that was thought about from the get-go. How do we make this safer in design? And, by doing that, we eliminated over 350 craft worker years just by that step alone. Again, as we all know, falls, particularly in the US, is the #1 reason that people die on job sites. And eliminating 350 of those worker years is a massive step forward to implementing and changing the industry. And that's ultimately what I hope to take forward in this as I move on to other projects. And the last lesson that I've learned, right? We can't put a price on one's life. We cannot allow ourselves to make these day-to-day challenges, overseed or a project's goals overseed our precious resource. We are trying to encourage people to come into the industry, not discourage the people to come into the industry. Safety needs to be in the forefront of the mindset for that reason. The collaborative elements that we found with lean and lean thinking, the respect for people, again, bringing that and creating that environment that people want to come to work. They appreciate working here. They appreciate that the things that they learn here that can be taken forward, I think is a testament to the project and what we've done. And again, right, it has come with a cost. It has come at a cost. And, again, those costs are worth it if we're taking the industry and making it better.
Exactly.
Overall.
You definitely want to spread how we're doing things here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if, like we're saying, we have many other things we did to improve safety on the site that we, didn't list here. If you want to, email us a comment after this or question, or even tell us what you've done on your site. It's all about working together. We can implement them here, you can implement them there. Let's try to help improve safety.
Our goal should be to improve the industry. Everyone's goal.
So I'd like to close this to thank our two presenters for all of they've done. It's made my job a whole lot easier. One of the things that's really great about working for Jacobs is that they have what they call a Beyond Zero program. And what this is we're looking and saying it's beyond just the safety at the site. It's just beyond just making sure people have the proper PPE, but how do we make sure that our people go home as safe as they were? And how do we make sure that they are actually safe, both mentally and physically, throughout their entire lives? So it's a culture of caring that Jacobs established with this Beyond Zero program that really drives all of us within the company to be looking at taking care of each other in a meaningful way, and using lean processes really helps that out. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to questions from the audience.
Wonderful. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. We do have some questions. I also want to remind people this is the time to put your plus deltas into the questions box. Again, if you weren't at the beginning of the webinar and are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation. Deltas are things you think we can improve to add more value to the presentation. You heard our panelists mention continuous improvement. We want to make sure our webinars are exactly what it is you'd like to hear. Our first question is, did your trade partners assist in developing the system in pre-construction, or was the system presented to trade partners during the bidding period?
Yes, so our trade partners had a hand in helping design and going through and facilitating the how they felt items could be modularized, or again, coming back to the racks with piping racks. All of that was assisted as part with our trade partners.
Yeah, we did have some trade partners that came in late, during the process, and you get a little bit of kickback from those guys when you come in and you're doing a new system here. But once they got into it and got involved with it, they really enjoyed it. It helped them plan their work and helped them with a safer way through.
Yeah, I think that's very vital is to get everyone on board very early. Again, right? They're the subject matter experts of what they're intending to install. How do we engage them and maybe get them to think a little bit different about how they've always done it, to challenge them, if you will, to make things improvement or make an improvement on their safety.
Additionally, we did offer to the trades, as they were onboarded, lean training to introduce them to the concepts of lean and last planner. Not all of them took advantage of it, but it was offered to the group.
Wonderful. Our next question is, to what extent are the contract terms and client/owner open to and aligned with these lean principles? And how can we address and incorporate this important consideration early on before signing the contract?
So I'll start with that and say that our contract terms used to be fairly vague about lean. Yes, you need to do the processes, you need to do this. We have since, in the last few years, really put more information about what the expectations are with lean, that we're going to be using last planner, that we're going to be doing 5S. We might, if it's a design assist or design build trade, we might be involving them with target value delivery. So we have included a lot more of that information in our front end documents for our trades. As far as our clients, some of our clients are very involved. Some of our clients are less involved. This particular client was very interested in implementing Last Planner on the project. They had a champion within their group that was helped to make that come to fruition. But what we have found is that whether our client is really involved or whether they're only mildly involved, we are still going to be using these techniques because we know that it works.
Gentlemen, anything to add?
Yeah, we actually are starting some new buildings out here as well. And I'm the site planner for those. And we actually had the trade partners coming up to me, weeks ago, when we're going to start doing this, when we're going to start doing this, and that's amazing, to implement a program on a project, such as lean, and everybody to be so enthusiastic about it and ready to get it going. That's amazing.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would probably add to that is, again, going back to some of our challenges and roadblocks. So it was one project, but all of the groups ran everything a little bit differently. Now, our building was kind of one of the last ones in the line to be wrapped up here. And I think ours was the one that embraced, the last planner system, kind of just that mindset holistically throughout the project. And again, as Todd was alluding to, with additional phases that have now been added, the collective has now kind of come to Todd and myself to implement this as a more broader program on the site, to centralize and more harmonize the project through the next phase. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, our buy-in has grown as we have shown that this really is adding value. I think we've increased buy-in on multiple levels.
Fantastic. Our next question is regarding safety. Have you or other parties conducted any risk assessments before starting the work to identify the most significant hazards on site?
Yes. So every trade partner has risk assessments for every task that they have. There's always a JHA. There is always SSOWs before starting work. All of those critical risk assessments are all evaluated well prior to the planning of the work, before the work ever gets executed in the field. And then holistically, that's walked down on a day-to-day basis, and adjustments are made as we need to, as the spatial requirements are found.
Yeah, they're not only walked down with the trade partners, the CM reviews the whole plan, walks it down, and even the safety personnel has to sign off and walk it down. So you have three fronts of protection there.
And trade partner safety. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot of gates to make sure that whatever risk, whatever activity is identified, and the risks are evaluated very early on in the process before work is ever even get close to the field.
And if that changes, if anything changes,
Stop.
Middle of the day, 10 minutes later, whatever it is, we stop, we write out a whole nother program.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I want to remind everybody, please put in those plus deltas. We'd love that feedback from you for continuous improvement. Go ahead and put those into the questions box as well. Our next question is, and this is talking about the high-risk labor hours that you had spoken about before. What do you mean by high-risk labor hours? Is it from the perspective of pulling off the schedule or actual safety risk?
It's eliminating elevated work. So again, those piping racks and a stick-built system, all of that piping would have been installed and welded in the field, with either a worker out of a lift or off a scaffold. And again, right, not only do we get the schedule benefit because that's done in a controlled environment, but we get the risk that work can go in place faster in the field, but I don't have to have people up in those areas, in those tight spots to drop something, to fall out of a basket, to fall out of anything. Again, it's the overall reduction of high risk work that, again, planning out your work can do.
Yeah, falls account for over 39% of all deaths in the US per year. Anything we can do to eliminate that and shorten that number, we're gonna do it.
Time on the ground is better spent on the ground.
That's right.
I wanted to let you know that there's 5 more minutes left in the webinar. If your questions are not answered, they will be sent directly to the panelists and they'll be able to follow up with you directly. Our next question is about residential construction. Is every principle not relevant and achievable to the residential construction industry?
Oh, absolutely. You can use the same principle. I mean, you can not only do you use the safety at your work site, you even think about your safety and how to do things safe at home. I mean, just your own personal home. But absolutely, you can plan out things just like you can here, on your residential site. Plan out things for safety. Think of a better safety way to do it. Use your safety plans before you start. Look at the hazards. Go over it with your team. Have a little meeting, go over it with your team before you start work. And before you go back to work after lunch, see if anything's changed. But yes, absolutely, you could use this in residential.
I certainly think I'm gonna go back to the point that we talked about with critical thinking about the process. I couldn't tell you how many houses I've driven by, whether it's someone just building a roof or working on a roof that aren't tied off on a residential roof. It's not necessarily always standard practice that all of these different companies are aligning with. A lot of it could be, I need to go tear that roof off in a day, and that just needs to be done in a day. So however you get it done in a day, as long as it's done, I'm okay. Or whether you're putting your trusses on your homes, how can you do those activities safer? How can you eliminate hazards of falling when you're putting on trusses on the houses, or you're sheathing, or whatever the case is? It's asking those next layers of questions of how can I genuinely make this safer? What are my true hazards in this situation, and how can I eliminate them?
And what comes next? What's the next hazard?
What's next?
Always look ahead.
Okay. Our next question is, you mentioned different buildings had different adoption levels of lean construction techniques. Did this cause issues during construction? How did you work to solidify the message that you were sending to contractors?
So I'm going to start with that one. And that was a big issue because, we had some teams that really had trouble getting rid of the dictatorship, the command and control. They were stuck in their old ways, and other teams were more amenable. And it did cause some confusion with some of our trades, because we had trades working on different buildings and they were asked to do different things, to different processes. So it did cause some problems. But part of that is what all firms that are adopting lean and last planner systems see, is that you have different you can mandate things, but not everybody has that capability to make that change. So the biggest plus is having teams, having people like Todd and Brent who have made this work, and you see the trade start seeing how effective it is, and the other team leaderships see how effective it is, and that's really one of the best selling points. So yes, it was difficult. Yes, there were some people who were told this is what they were supposed to be doing, and they skirted the issue or tried to minimally put it in place. But in the end, people started seeing what the real benefits were. And as we move forward, we're having a lot easier time implementing Last Planner and other lean processes on our projects because of the adoption and the results from this project.
Yeah, if I could quickly add to that, the greatest compliment I think I received personally was, the other buildings aren't doing it like this, but I like how you guys are doing it better. And again, it came back to just transparency of the process, of what systems we were trying to go after, what was our goals for the week, having them easily identified, having them in a room. Again, that was kind of unique to what we did in our building. And, our building, our huddle room became a focal point that the client would bring numerous people through, and numerous other building leaderships through. Again, I think that was the greatest reward for us, to understand that what we were doing was something that people were trying to implement. It wasn't anyone trying to come and show us how to do it. It was, how are you doing that, and how can I make my team better? I think was our best feedback.
Absolutely.
So we are out of time. I would like to thank Anne-Marie Thornquist, Brett Wise, and Todd Hart from Jacobs, our Safety and Construction Week member campaign winners, for putting on this fantastic webinar today. I would need to remind you that it was being recorded, and a copy of the recording and slide deck will be sent to all registrants, as well as put on the website and social media, so you will all be able to have access to it. For those questions that were not answered, again, these will be sent directly to the panelists. They will be able to follow up with you right away. So thank you very much, everybody, and we hope to see you soon on another webinar. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.